James Cameron's Titanic was the highest grossing movie of all time, earning over $1.8 billion in its original theater run, and it took 12 years to dethrone it with yet another James Cameron film, Avatar.
I'm the king of the world!
But did you know that Titanic was a surprise box office hit? Yeah, one of the biggest, because the film was expected to flop as hard as Waterworld and was considered a failure way before it hit theaters due to its delays, production issues, and its overinflated budget that made it the most expensive film at the time. And these issues were made wildly public as they occurred. Variety even had a daily Titanic Watch column in the newspaper dedicated to tracking all of the film's problems. 20-hour workdays, cast and crew injuries, and someone drugging the cast and crew's food were just some of the issues in this troublesome production. What started with a man who just wanted to check out a shipwreck himself quickly spiraled into something no one could control. We now know that there was a happy ending to all of this, but the journey to get to that conclusion is a fascinating one that we're going to be exploring in this video. The journey of how Titanic proved everyone wrong. We begin on April 15th, 1912, when the actual Titanic hit an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean, taking over 1,500 lives with it. Fast forward to 1987, where James Cameron was watching a National Geographic special on Robert Ballard's expedition to the ship's remains. Cameron took note of a film idea that takes place in modern day, intercut with the memory of a Titanic survivor. He was very fascinated with the ocean, especially shipwrecks, believing that the Titanic was the Mount Everest of shipwrecks. When he saw the 1992 IMAX film Titanica, which was composed of newer shots of the Titanic, Cameron knew he needed to get Hollywood to fund his own expedition. He was already a well-known director by this time, with hits like Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, and Terminator 2. He has proven to do extremely well at the box office, with his next film True Lies cementing this even further in 1994. So he wrote a scriptment for the Titanic and met up with 20th Century Fox. It was one of the shortest pitches for a major film in Hollywood history. Cameron opened up a book with Ken Marshall's painting of the Titanic and said, "Romeo and Juliet?" on that. Just 5 words. The Fox executives were a little hesitant with its commercial potential. They were hoping for another action film by the director instead. It didn't help that the film Raise the Titanic, based on the book, flopped in 1980. But since they wanted to have a long-term relationship with Cameron, the film was approved. Diving down to the actual wreck was also approved because it would only be a bit more expensive than using CGI and elaborate models to simulate it. The purpose of these dives were not just for shooting footage to be used in the film. Seeing the actual wreck gave Cameron a strong sense of the profound sadness and injustice of the disaster, and he felt a great mantle of responsibility to properly convey the story's emotional message. There were 12 dives total in 1995 using a Russian-made research submarine. Cameron spent 6 months researching the Titanic's crew and passengers, wanting to get every detail right to honor those that have died. By the end of it, he had a clear picture of what exactly happened to the ship, which put pressure on him to make this film the definitive visualization of this tragic moment in history. Cameron finished the script himself, and the film was set to start filming in July of 1996, with a budget of $110 million and an allotted 138 days. And it's funny how the casting went, because on one side you had Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack, who originally didn't even want the role, and on the other side you had Kate Winslet as Rose, who pleaded to Cameron, "You don't understand me. I am Rose. I don't know why you're even seeing anyone else." None of the lead actors were proven box office heavyweights just yet, so the selling point would need to be what kind of spectacle $110 million could buy. To help achieve this spectacle, Fox acquired 40 acres of waterfront south of Playas de Rosarito in Mexico and built a new studio with a 17 million gallon water tank that would house the exterior of the reconstructed ship. The ship was built to full scale with certain redundant sections omitted and others slightly altered, and a 50-foot lifting platform was needed to tilt the ship during the sinking scenes. Filming started on July 31st, 1996, but the new set with the model ship wouldn't be ready until September, so other scenes were prioritized. They filmed the modern-day expedition scenes in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, aboard a ship with a name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, and already this early on, they encountered a serious problem. On August 9th, many of the cast and crew ate some seafood chowder and realized soon after that something was wrong with it. People were rolling around, seeing hallucinations, and had very red eyes. Some reported that people were racing in wheelchairs and forming conga lines. Over 50 people were rushed to the hospital. Luckily, James Cameron made himself throw up before experiencing anything too bad. By the end of August, the Nova Scotia Department of Health confirmed that the chowder was laced with PCP and a criminal investigation went underway. The culprit was never found, and this whole situation was very public and made the rounds in the newspapers. When the new set was finished, the real challenge began. With up to 1,000 extras and 800 crew members at any given time, the pressure of making this film weighed heavily on Cameron, and he wasn't shy about showing it. Cameron has a history of being very vocal and demanding on set, especially when filming Aliens and The Abyss. But it was this production that cemented him as the scariest man in Hollywood and a 300 decibel screamer. Kate Winslet was genuinely frightened of him, claiming that she'd never do another film with him unless she got paid a lot of money. But she did end up reuniting with him in the second Avatar film. Crew members had the worst of Cameron's perfectionist attitude, eventually giving this alter ego of his the nickname Midge, which was Jim backwards. Cameron responded to the criticism saying that filmmaking is war, a great battle between business and aesthetics. And the business side was definitely putting a lot of pressure on him because he was starting to go way over budget and they were definitely going to go past the allotted filming schedule. This made 20th Century Fox very nervous, so they approached Paramount with a deal for the film to split the cost and distribution rights in turn for $65 million. Paramount accepted, which put Fox a bit at ease because they would reduce some of their losses from this disaster that was about to unfold. Many newspapers, including Variety's Titanic Watch, were keeping up with these budgets and production issues. Everyone was writing off the film as a catastrophic failure. Cameron even challenged this unflattering narrative by writing to the LA Times that it is a difficult production, but a lot of the crew member quotes are being taken out of context. He also mentioned that he waved most of his salary away when the budget began to climb. His $8 million salary was forfeited, along with Leo and Kate Winslet also taking pay cuts in exchange for profit deals. But the beliefs that Titanic would fail also leaked into the production, with even Cameron believing it. He said, "When we were filming, we were just trying to figure out how much money we were going to lose." To finish, there would often be 20-hour workdays, with many cast and crew members coming down with colds, the flu, and kidney infections from being in the tank's cold water for hours. Many ended up leaving the production. 3 stuntmen suffered broken bones from a single stunt. Kate Winslet got hypothermia, chipped a bone in her elbow, and had deep bruises all over her arms and almost drowned when her coat got snagged on a gate underwater. She said the production was every man for himself on set. And Cameron adopted a very militaristic way of directing. There were absolutely no bathroom breaks, leaving the cast and crew peeing into the water tanks used for filming. It was reported that the water quickly became filthy. All the heat was on Cameron during filming, whether from studio execs or the media. He was in charge of the biggest roll of the dice in film history. On March 23, 1997, filming was finally completed, stretching the original allotted 138 days to 160 instead, and the initial $110 million budget inflated to $200 million, making it the most expensive film of all time back then. But the problems and pessimism were still far from over. Only the editing and visual effects were left. Both studios were still expecting the film to be completed for the initial July 2nd, 1997 release to exploit the lucrative summer season and make some kind of money back. But by April, because of how difficult the special effects were, there was no chance it would be ready in time, so Cameron fought to push it back. The studios decided to push it all the way back to December 19th, 1997 to not interfere with some of their other big films. The delay announcement fueled even more speculation that the film would flop. Cameron said, "We were being pummeled relentlessly in the press about epic cost overruns, set safety, delivery dates, and just about everything. We were the biggest morons in Hollywood history, and the press had the long knives out, sharpening them as we approached our summer release." On Cameron's editing desk, he even had a razor blade with a note that said, "Use only if film sucks." And when he finished editing, the film had a runtime of over 3 hours. The Fox executives panicked and asked for an hour to be cut down because its length would mean fewer showings each day and much less revenue. But Cameron refused to make any changes and said, "You want to cut my movie? You're going to have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're going to have to kill me." Cameron did get his way, but he confided with a friend saying, "I just realized I made a $200 million chick flick where everyone dies. What the hell was I thinking? I'm going to have to rebuild my career from scratch." Any praise for the film by the business execs became more sparing as time went on. Paramount were very grim with the release date approaching. Nobody thought they would make any profit. It was all about making sure the losses wouldn't be fatal. To make a profit, the film would need to rival some of the highest blockbuster earners like Jurassic Park, but Titanic didn't really have any merchandising options available, so they'd have an even more uphill battle. It didn't help that earlier that year, a big budget Broadway show about the Titanic released to mediocre reviews and technical issues. Analysts and critics were saying that it would be impossible to make a profit. One critic said that it would recoup the investment if you wait long enough, that maybe in 2008 someone will buy that last Titanic VHS to finally give it a profit. On July 14th, a preview screening of an early cut was shown at Minnesota's Mall of America. A jaw-dropper. Fantastic. Favorable word of mouth began to spread on the internet. A few more edits to the cut were made, and soon more positive media coverage began. It would need much more than this to really get the ball rolling, but this first sign of encouragement was a good start. On November 1st, 1997, Titanic premiered at the Tokyo International Film Festival after James Cameron refused to have the world premiere in LA. Many studio execs came to the premiere, not to enjoy the film, but to bury those involved with it. The atmosphere was very gloomy because the people in charge of these initial screenings really believed they were on the verge of losing their jobs. The world premiere's reaction to the film was lukewarm, but positive reviews began to appear in the US as more press screenings happened. On December 14th, the official Hollywood premiere occurred where big movie stars attended and were enthusiastically gushing about the film publicly.
It was really the best movie I've ever seen.
With the initial positive reviews and word of mouth, it looked like there would be a chance the film would dodge the iceberg, but the true test was still to come. The film opened on December 19th in the US. The reviews attached to it were mostly great, some calling it the first spectacle in decade that invites comparison to Gone with the Wind. The film was up against Tomorrow Never Dies, which released the same day, as well as Scream 2 and Home Alone 3, which released the week prior. To have any chance of success, analysts said the film would need a $25 to $30 million domestic opening weekend. So what did it get? $28.6 million. A good start. But then the second weekend numbers came in and it went up to $35 million instead of the usual drop. Everyone involved with the film paused. Something unusual was happening. Its third weekend earned $33.3 million, then $28.7 million, then again with $30 million, topping each weekend's box office. This movie was an experience for many, and as often with experiences, you wanted to share it, so many rewatched it by grabbing a friend or family member to show it to. The most rewatches came from teen girls who were going crazy over Leonardo DiCaprio in the film, starting what was known as Leo Mania. But this wasn't the only target audience. The film was a perfect 4-quadrant film. Although it was a true love story at its core, it had the backdrop of a disaster film with the spectacle to make it a must-see event rather than just another film. And the box office numbers were even more impressive due to theaters only being able to show it 3 times a day, where midnight showings made theaters packed until 3:30 a.m. Theaters even had multiple screens dedicated to playing Titanic to meet up with the demand, which wasn't common back then. 8 weeks after the film's debut, it recorded its highest single-day earnings on Valentine's Day with $13 million. The film stayed #1 domestically for 15 consecutive weeks, a record for any movie before losing out to Lost in Space of all films. It was still #1 by 1998's Oscars, which Titanic swept, winning 11 out of its 14 nominations, including Best Picture, the second film to ever win 11. James Cameron went home that night with 3 Oscars. The film's soundtrack was the best-selling album of 1998, and Celine Dion's hit song for the film, My Heart Will Go On, scooped up 4 Grammys. Funnily enough, the song was written and demoed in secret because Cameron originally didn't want any songs in the film, but changed his mind because it would help appease some anxious studio execs. We went from the lowest lows to the highest highs, producer Ray Sancini said. It was a disorienting experience for all of us, but most of all for Jim. He was emotionally and physically exhausted. Titanic stayed in North American theaters for 10 months before finally leaving on October 1st, 1998. Tallying a total domestic gross of $600.7 million, but even more impressive, a worldwide gross of $1.242 billion. This gave its initial theater run a grand total of over $1.8 billion, beating out Jurassic Park to become the highest grossing film of all time. Amassing another $995 million in revenue from its VHS sales and becoming the first DVD to sell 1 million copies, there's no denying that Titanic was an enormous success. What was once considered the biggest roll of dice in Hollywood, with everyone including Cameron writing the film off as a failure way before it released, became one of the biggest surprise hits ever. Described as flawlessly crafted, intelligently constructed, strongly acted, and spellbinding, Titanic currently sits at an 88 on Rotten Tomatoes and 75 on Metacritic and is ranked 4th on the highest grossing films of all time. James Cameron and the entire production proved everyone wrong, with the film not joining the ranks of mega flops like Waterworld and Cleopatra. And although he forfeited his $8 million salary, his profit sharing earned him over 10 times that. Quite a good payday for someone who just wanted to check out a shipwreck himself. And that is the story of how Titanic, the $200 million underdog, surprised everyone. Now you think people would have learned a lesson, but Avatar received the same treatment. Everyone expected it to flop, but it instead became the highest grossing film of all time. And the same thing with Avatar: The Way of Water. Moral of the story is, don't underestimate Midge. And that's about everything. Thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on Titanic and its success story? Do you think the third Avatar will continue the streak? Leave your comments down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to check out our Patreon for more content and cool perks. And until next time, have a good one.